In looking at the Gospel of John, and specifically John 1 1 to 14, in the prologue of John, it is interesting to look at the Greek text and how it, can I say, helps elucidate through the grammar, the great theological truths that are being taught in John 1. We begin in verse 1 where it reads, "En arche ein halagas, kai halagas ein prostantaan, kai theas ein halagas." Notice, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was face to face with God, and the Word was divine, or was God. Three great statements shown by the imperfect indicative active of the verb eimi, which is ein in Greek. In other words, in the beginning was always existing the Word. We've talked about logos going back to memra in Aramaic, at least looking at the Aramaic word memra in the Targum, meaning the word which is used which is used actually in place of God. But at any rate, the point I want to make are the three ains here. In the beginning was existing the word. The imperfect shows continuous action in past time. So the Word, that is Christ, is eternal. He was always existing from all eternity in the beginning. Secondly, and the Word was prastantaan. Pras shows toward God, meaning like face to face with God. And that second ain was shows where Christ always was. He was always in that intimate relationship with God the Father, face to face. And then thirdly, the Word was God. Theos is a predicate nominative in Greek, which is predicating the truth about the Word, that is Christ. The Word was always divine. Ain again is showing the continuous existing in the past from all eternity. So, three great statements using the imperfect of the verb ein here. Ein, the word shows eternality in the first one. The word was in the beginning. Secondly, the word was face to face with God, showing intimate, eternal relationship, and then with the Father. And then thirdly, the word was fully divine, had the full quality of deity, just like God is love. Like I've said before, we would never translate it God is a love, but God has the full quality of love in that predicate nominative in 1 John. Now, what I wanted to show is the three contrasts with the three ains in the verb agenita. Agenita is the aorist indicative middle. The word became something, or something became. It's looking at a point of beginning in contrast to what was always eternal. So all things agenita through him. In other words, Jesus is the agent of all things, of creation. So in contrast to him, who is eternal, all things had a beginning, agenita, in this aorist indicative middle. And without him, agenita, came not one thing, which has gegon in. Gegon in is the perfect indicative active from genomai. The point I wanted to make, though, is secondly, while Jesus is eternal, all things, all creation had a beginning. All creation is not eternal. All creation had a beginning through him. Secondly, the second contrast, the Word was face to face with God. That ain is contrasted in verse 6 with John. Notice, agenata anthropos, there came a man, apostaumenas parathou, having been sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness. So the second contrast is while the Word was eternally, that is Christ, face to face with God the Father, John had a beginning point. Became a man. The man John was not Ain, he was not always was, but he had a beginning point. So there came a man having been sent from God, not face to face with God as Christ was from all eternity. Thirdly, the Word was divine. Kaitha asein halagos. The contrast, I think, with that is now in verse 14. Kai halagos sarx agenata. That is, the Word that was fully divine from all eternity, agenata, became sarx, became flesh, meaning he became human with all of the weaknesses of being human, like he was thirsty, he became thirsty, he became tired, etc., but without sin. The Bible says he who knew no sin became a sin offering for us. So the Word became flesh in the incarnation. There was a beginning point for the incarnation or the humanity of Jesus, where his eternal divine person always existed. So the Word became flesh. And askenosin, a very interesting word, pitched his tent among us, pup tented among us. Askenosin, another aorist indicative showing point of time. In a point of time, he pup tented among us, and we, as apostles, gazed upon his glory. Glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. In other words, he was uniquely begotten in the incarnation, never happened before or since. So the third contrast is he who was fully God from all eternity became human, and yet, as I said, without sin, and he askenosin. Interesting verb from skenao that means to tabernacle or to dwell. When we look at the Hebrew of the Old Testament, especially in Exodus, the glory of God, shachan, it dwelt in the tent of meeting, in the Mishkan. What is exciting here is Jesus dwelt in flesh. That became the Mishkan for the divine second person of the Godhead, Jesus Christ. That is, he dwelt among us. And that was the incarnation, going back to the imagery or the language of Exodus chapter 40, where he pup tented among us, so to speak. So here we have three contrasts in the verb ein contrasted with the verb agenata from genomai. Three imperfects. Jesus was always eternal. Secondly, he was always face to face with God the Father. Thirdly, he was always divine. What a contrast of three things that John makes. All things had a beginning point. That is, they came through Christ, the Word, who was always eternal. All things are not eternal. Secondly, John had a beginning point. Jesus was always face to face with the Father, whereas John became a man, sent from the Father, but never eternally face to face with the Father. And thirdly, the Word, that is Jesus, who was always fully divine, became human, yet without sin, and he pup tented. He pitched his tent, tabernacled among us, and we gazed upon his glory. Just like the glory of God filled the tent of meeting, and we saw his kavod, or his glory. So here we gazed, the apostles, John is saying, we gazed upon his glory, glory as of the unique begotten Son of God, who is the Logos, the Word, or the Memra. What a beautiful theological, can I say, understanding that Greek grammar and vocabulary can give to us.